So I did not concentrate a lot of the stuff on how to actually pitch. What I did was I typed down or put down some kind of parts of my story that I thought might be helpful or relevant for whatever reason. This definitely is not going to be like a build you up and get you excited about raising money. It's about kind of telling you that it's really fucking hard to raise money, and it's even harder because you're in Iowa. It's not an advantage, it is a disadvantage, and you need to accept that, and that's part of being here. This is kind of something that, to me, is actually how raising money feels, especially with people you don't know. Sorry, louder. Can people in back hear me?
There you go.
So raising money to me always felt like, especially with people you don't know, is you have to tell them things about you that your friends don't even know about your business and how you plan to make it work. And it is a lot like just like standing naked in front of people with the lights on while they make fun of you with a bag over your head. And that is kind of what it's like. You basically bear all to someone because you think they might write you a check. So you should really maximize the people that you want to have that experience with, which is to say, don't pitch everybody. Don't take every meeting. I guess my history is my first company, I didn't know how to raise money, but we turned a $1,200 investment into many millions of dollars in sales over the lifespan of the company. I sold that company a few years ago. I've raised a little over $6 million for my current project, which is called Dwala, which is a payment network. And I'm sure in the future, we'll raise much more money in many different projects. And we've learned a lot about who ideal investors are, who they're not. We're fortunate that we haven't had any really rogue investors that have tried to really fuck up the company or something. And I think that's because we've been really selective about who we've taken money from. Our current investors include close to a $2 billion financial institution, which is a chartered institution, a financial services platform with about 2 million clients. I invested, other angels invested, and just recently a string of New York venture funds. And if any point in time you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Just shoot your hand up. I'm not a shy guy. This was not meant as a lecture. The more interactive it is, the more value everyone will get out of it. Yes?
How do you define angels then? When you talk about the angels there, what kind of people were they?
So when I think angel, I think individual investor with a high enough net worth that they don't get forced out of the company. So an accredited angel investor. So someone with a net worth of over $1 million.
Okay.
So they were actually very early investors of mine early on. One of those was actually my attorney. So I started my first company when I was 18 or 19. I dropped out of college and built that company. He was the guy who represented me the first time somebody tried to sue me to get a bunch of money out of me. And he actually ended up investing later. So my background is that I've pretty much done every part of the company. I owned a manufacturing company before, so I've done everything from QA, QC on hardware and on software. I've also done direct sales. I've done management when I need to. I've cleaned the bathrooms, and I've engineered direct parts, whether or not that be software or hardware. I know a lot about actually PP tooling and casting and things like that because what I used to manufacture was speakers. So the New York-based funds were primarily who we raised our last round from, and our last round was a $5 million round, not on convertible notes or any of that stuff. It was a direct equity investment from a group of people that honestly have a lot of experience in the space. We chose them very specifically because of other investments and because who our friends said wasn't assholes. So Union Square is kind of famous for investments in Twitter and Zynga and Foursquare, your web companies. Village is really strong in the financial institution space and in payments. Thrive is really kind of a really quiet fund, but they're really active investors in the sense that they're always in the product and they're always helping us look at what's next. And Artisan Instigators is a fund that's run by a guy by the name of Mark Echo. A lot of people know Echo, kind of the brand. But that was really just about, they make bets on, honestly, people that are just a little bit different. And every single one of these bet on us for different reasons. Union Square Ventures, I believe, bet on us because the idea is fucking huge. If it works, it's gonna be really cool. If it doesn't, who really knows? Village, because we know payments really well and they know that. And again, they know we're very unique in the space. Thrive, a lot of it's about marketing and where they can provide value. And Artisan Instigators is, whether or not it's good or bad, it's really a bet on me.
And Ben?
Yeah.
You got your foot in the door with those people?
So, actually, it started with Mike and Christian. So 2 years ago, when I came to Des Moines, I already had another company that, I was doing millions of dollars in sales. I had a really small staff. I didn't have outside investors. I thought I was doing pretty decent. But I didn't know shit about raising money. So I started looking at, well, how am I going to go do this? Because payments is a totally different type of business. And I ran around in Des Moines for a long time trying to figure out how to do it, and basically just having the balls to go pitch it and talk to people. And eventually, after I kind of got through Mike's BS filter, I got to JD. And then once JD started sitting in the room, that had different value for other people, and bankers were sort of listening to me. And I know how I look. I'm not a banker, right? So after the bankers kind of signed off on the fact that, well, Ben is or is not full of shit, that opened a lot of other doors. And then we started targeting where we can go hit those people in large numbers, which essentially meant conferences. So now I basically travel around a lot to try and get in arguments with people on stage in front of like 1,000 people. And I really like arguing with people from PayPal and Visa. We're not trying to say like we're right, but we are trying to say we're not wrong and our opinion is good. And I do have enough confidence that I'll get on stage and I will talk about that. And I'm not scared that somebody's going to say something I don't understand. That's helped a lot. And in the meantime, it's got us in a lot of doors where we're queuing up a lot of conversations so we get to pick who to go talk to next. So the different rounds that we did, the first round that we did here locally was $1 million. And the people that we work with solved not only kind of a money issue, which was how are we really going to finance this thing into profitability, because a quarter scales really well, but 100 customers isn't really going to pay a lot on a few transactions. You're not going to make enough to be profitable. So we really needed to build out the engineering platform, but more importantly, we needed to solve regulatory issues to get out into the marketplace legally. So those early investors solved our regulatory issues and also our funding issues. And the second round, which is the $5 million round, was really all about we need to expand the team. We need to invest in architecture ahead of kind of the market a little bit. We need to get more aggressive in the marketing space. And really, we know we're going to need additional access to capital, because as we started realizing it's a global opportunity, not a national opportunity. The market in the United States alone is a $32 trillion market. There aren't many markets that big. Globally, I don't even know what the number is, but we know it's going to take a substantial amount of money, and those funds also give us access to more capital. So when it comes to pitching, like Mike said, a lot of it is about you. A lot of it is about your idea. So how many people are trying to like raise capital right now? Okay, like how many people are trying to raise like over $1 million? How many people are trying to raise under $500,000? Okay, cool. So I think things to concentrate on is the people who you're going to raise money from at those levels probably aren't going to understand every single nuance of your business. Maybe you don't yet. They're going to make a bet totally on you, and your ability to articulate your idea and where you want to go with it is really not, it's difficult to argue. Either they agree with you and they believe in you, or they don't. There's, and I'm guilty of it too. There's well, if we get enough people in this thing, we can definitely make money on it, right? That's a bet some people are willing to make because you're just so smart and you've done it so many times in the past and you've flipped companies based on that notion. But for the majority of us, we actually have to have a clear path to revenue and be able to articulate how we're going to make that happen. I'm also really good at accepting what I don't know. So you think about like those moments when you're kind of like saying, okay, when somebody's saying something, you have no fucking idea what they're saying, right? Don't do that. Say, what does that mean? I mean, JD's been in meetings with me where I asked what word people use so I could write it down and look it up later. Like, it happens. Just deal with it. You don't know everything. Be clear about that. I show up. So the reason that I put some of this stuff up is because there's also points when you start getting into raising a substantial amount of capital where you're making really big bets. And those really big bets, sometimes they work, but the majority of the time, believe it or not, they don't work. And you have to accept that, like, there are very real moments of like total self-doubt of I'm fucked. Like, how can I double mortgage my house? How can I get ready to sell a car? Like, everybody, Charisse is now the CEO of our company. There was a point in Dwala's life cycle where I remember sitting in Christian's old office in Palisades, and she reminded me of it yesterday when we were talking about this, kind of the concept of, I actually remember saying, I don't know what I'm going to do if we can't close this thing. And we knew how much runway we had, and we got it closed, and lo and behold, something really magnificent happened. So the first company I started, I put in a $40,000 order for parts without the money to pay for it. I didn't even need the money. I put the order in, and somehow at like 19, I came up with 20 grand over a period of like a month or two, and I did it by selling shit on eBay. Like, I just hustled. Right? I got the order in, and then I turned the 40 grand into 120 grand in probably like 3 or 4 months. Like half the shit broke and then I had another problem on my hands. But like this stuff is kind of like how it works, and you kind of just have to like accept that. And there's also a million times where you feel like you're just sort of telling someone, I don't think you understand. Like if you don't help me with this or you don't give me this, like I'm broken, we're dead. Like this stuff actually happens, you know? I mean, how many of you guys have kind of been there?
More than once.
Yeah, I mean, like you got to make bets, right? And that's part of like the ability to build businesses is kind of like the balls of making a bet. You're right and you're wrong, and you have to be calculated about it. You're not just throwing dice hoping that it works. Everyone around you is going to think you're totally insane, but to you, it's like a calculated endeavor, right? You've done all the math in your head, and you're thinking, there's no way I can make this bet. And everybody will think you're insane. But you notice there's like a constant theme here is most of the time my girlfriend and all the people around me are ready to kill me and telling me to stop, which is another interesting thing that you kind of got to surround yourself with people who believe that you can actually do it if that's what you want to do. Yeah. I mean, you got to also kind of, as your teams start to grow, the hardest point is not getting started. It's keeping the business going as you make these really big bets, because inevitably there are companies that grow so fast on revenue alone that you don't have these issues. But if you're making big bets in big markets, chances are really good you're going to ride a really fine line a lot of times. And then as your team grows, you have to personally kind of deal with the fact that the people on your team, they have to eat, they have kids, they have cars, they have houses, and if you fuck up on this current deal, they will lose all that stuff. And it's your fault. It's part of growing companies, right? So you should kind of just know going into this stuff that it's not stress-free. When you take bigger kind of VC money, or when you take traditional venture money, not angels, right, who might be quiet, but venture money, you kind of need to deal with it. Again, as you start dealing with these bigger outside firms, no one's going to have patience for your mistakes. They're not your friends where they're saying everything's going to be okay. They're actually the ones telling you that you're broke in X months if you don't do this. Your idea was really stupid. It didn't work. What are you going to do now? You just spent $500,000 of our money. You're an idiot. Defend yourself. Like that sort of happens, right? And again, it's not easier because you're in Iowa. It is harder because most people here don't understand the structure, whether or not that be convertible notes, whether or not that be the time and energy it's going to take in your personal life. Most people around here are not going to understand. So you should be actually doing things like this, but you should also be looking in the outside markets for knowledge as well. AngelList is one I really like, and you should really get used to like being talked down to. So a local venture guy here locally laughed at me when I pitched him a couple years ago, and I know for a fact that he was trying to get into my company through like a back door because he knows there's no way in hell I would ever let him into my company. But like that stuff happens. They don't know like who's all the wiser until you go out and prove them any different. And kind of those moments of kind of like the proof is in execution will make raising capital that much easier for you. And if you have a working prototype, obviously that works great. I kind of put in here reasons not to raise outside capital. Which pretty much means if you have anything in your life you really, really, really want to protect, you should probably reconsider it and maybe just consider raising big money in kind of the venture world is not about your personal life. That stuff sort of like takes a back seat. That's kind of life. There's not a lot of room for, well, it's not that big of a deal that you left at 5. It's that shit's broken. You shouldn't have left. Oh, by the way, you're fired and we can now do that because we're on your board. Like, so, again, more negative things before I get to the positive. If you like sleeping, if you are okay losing people's money, if you ever turn your phone off, if you ever give up on anything, or you think you'll just get rich because you're going to go do this because they write you a check, these are reasons you should not raise money. Any questions? So if you're like still here, like you're going to have to work really hard here to validate your ideas because a lot of the people that are going to invest in you aren't probably going to understand your market or your ideas, especially if it's a technical one. You're probably going to have to recognize that talking to more people here is not going to give you a higher rate of return because you're going to start doing more education as opposed to actual pitching. You're going to be educating your potential investors instead of just pitching them. So I really think that there's tons of value in being really selective about who you talk to, and this is something that I didn't do initially. I spent a ton of time talking to whoever would talk to me. if you want to go kind of raise capital, don't do it because you want a lifestyle business. Like if you want like a chain of bakeries or something, like that, where you're looking at like 4 stores and this is like the big thing, like that's a great dream and that is a really big dream, but it's not a reason to go raise $1 million. It just isn't. Like take out an SBA loan, finance it differently, don't give up equity in your company, like protect that with your life, but don't go raise outside money and give up equity and control of your company. So you should also know kind of why that investor would want to invest before going to talk to them. And it seems like the obvious answer to that is, well, they want a return on their money, right? And if they give that money to me, I will give them back more money. It's amazing how many people I've talked to over the last year that actually don't understand that the investor is going to want their money back and then some, and just having a profitable company at the end of it is not good enough. You either have to sell it, you have to start buying other stuff, or you have to start cutting them in on revenues. I mean, you got to figure out what you want to do with their money long term and be able to articulate that, and then figure out how you're going to do that and how you can leverage the resources that aren't just money. So this is something that, how many guys in the room have ever met Doug Reichart? So Doug gave me the rules, and I'm only going to share one with you, but one of the rules Doug gave me that I've always taken with me since meeting him was, I can't get what I want unless you get what you want. And nothing is more true with outside investors, that if you're not giving them something for that, and you don't know what it is they want, you should probably spend some time and figure it out what they want out of it and how they want it. Do they want an equity investment? Do they want a convertible note? Do they want a debt? Do they want a mezzanine loan? Like, what do they want? Figure that out before the meeting. So this is also another thing that I think, like I failed for a long time at raising capital. And if your goal is to raise capital to grow your business, you should internalize that if you haven't yet, you're failing. It's that simple. It's not because the investors don't get you, which they might not. It's not because your idea isn't good, which it might not be. So maybe improve your pitch, improve your product, build it out, do something. But the fact that you're not raising money isn't other people's fault. It's your fault. And as our kind of community grows up, that was something that it took me a little bit of time to understand, was that, well, who can I raise money from, or who's it easier? I don't want to raise money from these guys. But at the end of the day, it was I needed capital from the right people to pull something off, and not doing it meant I was failing. So things that are going to make raising capital way easier: have a working product about what you're pitching, or have like a huge revenue stream attached to something that is a part of what you're pitching. Don't pitch an idea to an outside investor unless you have a working product. I know it's really hard, and you look at it from the perspective of, well, I need an engineering team so I can build this product because it's really complicated. Anybody can come up with an idea they can't build to pay other people to go do it, right? And we all have kind of shortcomings, and I have tons of them. But initially, the fact that I found other people to work with and hired on the side to build out working prototypes and products where my shortcomings were, it helped me a ton long term. It also meant that I could figure out how on a little amount of money to get something up and running, and that was really useful for me long term. Knowing the product better than anyone else seems like an obvious thing, but when you pay an outside firm to build your prototype and you don't have any idea if you're built in like Ruby or .NET, and you're trying to pitch a tech investor, like, just know your product. It's pretty simple. And in order to kind of get faith from really good investors, and there's going to be exceptions to this where you're raising money from people that are just investing in you because of the fact that they like you for whatever reason. Maybe you drink with them, maybe they birthed you, who the fuck knows, right? Maybe they'll give you money. And again, a lot of people make the mistakes of like taking money from people that are really close in their personal life. That's one I should have put in here. Don't fucking take people, or like don't take money from people in your personal life. Like when you fuck it up, which inevitably you probably will, because we all do, and not everything goes right, you're gonna lose their money, and then you're gonna have to sit at Thanksgiving dinner with them. Like you're the asshole Uncle Tom that just lost their life savings. Like don't be that guy, right? Like find good investors to help grow your company. And I've done deals with my family, especially when I was really young, and they just don't work out well. Family and friends, even though a lot of people think that's where you get early money from, if it's really close in your circle, I would suggest against taking their money. Finance it as far as you can on your own. I also think my ability to say, well, I'm looking at doing this and I'm willing to put my own money into it. Like I had about 70,000 of my own money into it as we went through kind of our first $250,000 raise. So I worked really hard. I made a really big bet. And like I didn't have that much money in the bank, but I was pouring it in. I was ready to sell my car. I was ready to go get credit cards to finance the fucker. You do whatever you have to do, and people see that. And that's the type of like thing they invest in. if you are looking to try and get like $15,000 from a friend to go get like inventory to do something, but you're driving a car worth 20, looks like you have $15,000 right there. Why are you asking me, right? It's a little bit different when you're talking about bigger amounts of money, but your ability to kind of execute on those smaller levels at first, as you climb that ladder, I mean, you'll get there and it'll build a lot of trust. So I thought I took out all the swear words. I really thought I did. So the product in the market is really important when you're looking at raising a significant amount of capital. So if someone invests $1 million in your company at like a $10 million valuation or something of that nature, so they're buying 10% of your company for $1 million. Does anyone have any idea what kind of bet they're probably expecting you to sell the company for? A shit ton, right? Like 50 million would be okay. Like the fact that getting you to like 100 or getting you more, like that's something really substantial. So if you're raising a substantial amount of money and you're getting like strong valuations, or you're going out and trying to expect them, you can buy it down with revenues, right? So if you've got revenues that kind of say, I can take anybody's money, why should I take yours? That's one thing. But when you're just going out and saying, I think you're gonna make this really big bet on me without really understanding what they want out of it, just kind of try not to do that, because they won't let you back in the door. And if you screw it up and you have the wrong assumptions, just apologize. It's amazing how far being in Iowa and saying, I'm sorry, I made a poor judgment, let me go back and figure this out. Would you be willing to meet with me in 3 weeks? It's amazing how far that'll actually get you in kind of the investor world.
Ben, this part confuses me because I hear two different groups of people telling me two different things, which is, one, I hear earlier that VC type investors are looking for like a 3.5, 4 times return on their investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or when the risk reduces, it's 25% annualized or 20. And then I hear you saying they ain't gonna even mess around with this stuff unless they can get a 50 bang or 100 bang type of return on it. So which is it?
Well, they want as big as they can get.
Right, sure they
right?
do. But what's the minimum that they're willing to look at?
So the truth is somewhere between probably your 3 number, where they're probably making bets because they think it's a sure thing, and their bigger bets are probably in the thing that they think is a potential home run. And it could go a lot of ways, right? I don't know everybody, but I do know that had our goal of the company, our goal a while ago, so when we did the first round, we actually thought there's a possibility we'd probably sell the company about the point that we're at right now. And the valuation that we thought of and like the numbers as it related to what the company was worth was proven by a lot of the conversations that we had. So we could have sold the company. And we think they probably would have been very happy with their returns, the early investors would have been, but instead we decided to grow the company instead of sell it and really kind of ride the wave. And as we went through that, you know, we want to grow this into something really substantial and really big, and I would not take a $100 million like check to sell the company. Like, we want to go much bigger than that. I could be totally wrong, take that for what it's worth, but you know, we're swinging for the fences, and whether or not we're right or wrong, time will tell.
So what I hear you saying is you'd like to have the potential upside of the bigger wins, but
all calculations are actually relatively bullshit, right? So if somebody puts $1 million into your company and they get 5 back out in 2 years, that's a pretty good bet, right? But these guys are also investing out of funds that are 40, 100, $2 billion. Why the fuck is $1 million even worth their time? And it's insane to think about it like that, unless that $1 million is about something really substantial, where they're kind of planning to pile on after the fact to do something really big. And that's another problem is as you start raising bigger amounts of money, even getting their time, because even with a few $1 million, that might not be a big enough bet. Like a lot of the firms outside on the East and West Coast, they're probably not even gonna want to take a real seat on your board or really put a lot of time into it unless it's a substantial portion of their fund. So, you know, since a lot of people I don't think are looking at numbers that big yet, you know, that's something I'd be happy to answer questions about. But you know, that's also another reason why it's tough to do it here and being really selective about investors that are willing to travel. And we spent a lot of time finding people that had the right kind of knowledge base to work with, but also people that were willing to travel. And we were super fortunate that we feel like one of the best investors in the world, some of the best investors in the world were willing to spend some time in Iowa. And to be honest, like a lot of that stuff, I think we just got super lucky. But we can run numbers all day, right? I think that the one thing to look at as far as numbers would be, look at the type of company you want to build. So we'll just use photo sharing services, just as a generic, right? So say you're building a photo sharing service. Well, look at the last like 5 exits in the space. So what do the last 5 photo sharing services sell for? How many users did they have? How much data did they have? What was the metric for driving the valuation behind their sale price? And do you think that you can get that far? I mean, the truth is probably, again, somewhere in the middle where it normally is. But look at market data as it relates to the value of companies and ask yourself how far you can get in relation to where other people have and why you would or would not be more valuable. And if there is a way to say, well, this is where we're at, this percentage of our company costs this, and you can get this out of it, if they believe you, shit, they might invest. So not failing miserably, I think, is, again, this is something I failed at big time. Don't take every meeting. Everybody with more money than you is not a potential investor. It's that simple, and I didn't understand that at the beginning. I spent almost a year of my life with anyone who had more money than me. Or even worse, I didn't even ask how much money they had. I just figured if you had like a nicer house or a nicer car, like I was gonna pitch your ass, and it was that simple. And I wasted a lot of time. So I think being selective and also doing things like Angel List is something I bring up, and I don't know if you can see this, but it's just Angel List. So it's like a network of angels that are really active in our area and outside. But these guys actually do look at deals kind of in the technology space regardless of where you're at. And they're also the really, really, really smart guys kind of in the industry. So you'll be held to the same scrutiny as anybody else who's building a company in New York or San Francisco or Texas or Boston or wherever. It doesn't really matter. But if you put it up there and you get a response and the market thinks you're smart or the market thinks you're an idiot or you can't hang, well, at least like you go practice, you go work harder, and you come back with a better product, right? You have to have the balls to put your product out and see what other people think. And this is a direct access point to some of the smartest investors I know. We've never taken money from anybody. Actually, we have now taken money from people on Angel List, but we didn't meet them through Angel List. So I think there's a few other things that I learned the hard way. When somebody wasn't commenting on what I was saying, they were waiting for me to leave the room. They're waiting for me to run out of steam, shut up, and go home. So if someone's not responding to you or is totally uninterested in what you're saying, they're not waiting to be convinced. They're waiting for you to leave. Kind of sucks, but it's true. Active investors are going to be active in understanding your company, your product, your personality, and your story. And not getting a yes from someone means they just told you no. This is also the Midwest where people don't like to say no, even investors. So they'll string you along, trying not to be rude, but they'll waste a ton of your time in the meantime. So if they don't say yes, it's a no, and keep pursuing other opportunities. Learning to pitch and just figuring out if your pitch is good or bad is, God, I really thought I took the swear words out. Actually, did I just go back? Yeah. So which investors can help you hire and grow the team is something that we found to be incredibly valuable. There's a lot of value adds outside of money. So let's say, Brad's got a kick-ass gaming platform, how many, 3 million users, right? So I'm gonna pick on you for a minute. It's kind of like, if you're taking an outside capital, who's ideal? People that can help you grow a user base, people that can help you maximize revenue in gaming, people that can leverage outside advertising relationships to bring in that money, and people that can help maximize infrastructure for decreasing overhead, right? If they bring in capital and show returns and build the business at the same time, damn, that's a pretty good investor, right? So target that type of investor over basically somebody who might be willing to take 50 grand out of their 401k and give it to you because you're so great, right? One's gonna provide more value. So investors that can also be your customers or give you kind of your first distribution deal are super helpful. Again, if we're putting money in and helping to finance the company into a growth stage with customers that we're also going to produce for you, that's a pretty big win-win. Those people are really hard to find. They take a lot of time, a lot of late nights, but if you can get them, they're huge. And again, investors that can remove barriers to the marketplace. That might be branding, that might be actual distribution, that might be regulatory problems. But if you start looking at every investor under kind of the guise of how is working with you going to help me outside of just the money? Money really is, even though we don't think this way in Iowa, money is everywhere in the marketplace. If you can execute and if you can do well, you can probably raise capital, but the better you can do it and the more proof you have, whether or not it's social or product, you're gonna get a better deal, and you're also gonna be able to be more selective with your investors. It's not always about raising more capital, it's definitely about raising money from the right people. Things I think that will be, make it easier in building a company that you think is really big or can be really big. if you run out of money, sell stuff that you own. That proves you believe in it. If you don't, it says you don't believe in it. When investors see you're willing to kind of like put yourself out there to like make it happen, that's going to mean a lot to them. Hearing no and being okay with that is something that you just got to get used to. And I mean, raising capital, again, it's like dating. It's like people letting people look at you naked, being embarrassed when you're there, talking to people who initially you think are like the smartest people on the planet. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Some of it's attitude, some of it's demeanor, some of it's just the way they carry themselves where it's like, fuck man, you must be smart as hell. Like you're even dressed well. Like, you know, there are times when you look at these people and you just think, my God, you are like such an impressive man or woman. And everything you say must be true. But learning that you have confidence or should have confidence when you're communicating them because you know your product, you know your market, you know what your idea is. And if they say no, you just keep going, right? Don't hire people to raise money for you. I think that there is this like feeling of I've never raised capital before, so I don't know how to do it, right? And my personality is one that maybe people won't like, or investors just aren't going to understand me because I'm not an investor type. Like, do I look like an investor? Do I look like someone that should be talking about convertible notes? Like, I know I don't look like that person, right? But if you are actually out talking about your product and talking about your vision, those are the things that they're investing in, not what tie you're wearing today. It's that simple. So if you go out and you put yourself on the line for your product, your vision, and your story, and you stand by it, the right investors are going to have the right faith in you long term, and never, ever, 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 in my opinion, like let people raise money for you, or even definitely don't pay people to raise money for you unless they're already investors in the company. When I think there's something different when a current investor is out finding the right distribution relationships for you with other investors, that's one thing. But when there's like this kickback on the backside, like I don't like that. I think it feels uncomfortable. And like how many people have ever like been a salesperson or like hired multiple salespeople? So for the people that have been salespeople, have you ever like gone a little bit farther than you should have out on a limb and just kind of said like, no problem. It's going to be glossy too. It's going to be awesome. Just give me a check, right? Like if you've done sales, you know what it's like to like come this close to losing the deal and making it happen. But it's that much worse when it's not even you doing the work. It becomes, how many of you guys have like had salespeople that have just like sold so much more than you could ever produce at such a low cost? There's no way in hell you could ever produce it, right? So what happens if the livelihood of your entire company rides on the back of someone doing sales in a room where their kickback could be hundreds of thousands of dollars and you might not even be there to defend what you can or cannot do? Like, is that really the partner you want going forward who has a preconceived notion of who or what you are because of someone else? I just don't think those relationships are the way to do it. And if I fail at raising money, I might take that back and hire somebody to do it for me, right? So learn about things like dilution. Like understand that as you like raise capital, the numbers are going to change. And again, one thing that I was really naive about kind of at the beginning of this was what my board structure looked like, right? Or even why I would even care. Like if you invested in me, like we'll sit in the room, we'll talk about it. It should be good, right? You must believe in me. But there's so many politics behind it, you don't understand how that affects things like dilution of your own equity in your own company and your rights inside of it. Just like do some research around dilution. Understand what they want and over time what that means for you as a founder or as an early investor as well. Figure out what the last exits were in your space. I don't care if you're building plumbing companies, cupcake companies. It doesn't matter if it's tech, if it's sharing, what the fuck it is. It doesn't matter. Why does it have value, or why does it have value, and what is the metric that it's measured by? Is it how many items you ship? Is it revenue? Is it users? Is it account holders? Is it subscribers? What are the terms that these investors understand, and what is the mechanism for measuring it? Figuring out what it will be in your company really early on will serve you really well, and also knowing beforehand what market proof exists for basically valuing companies at any level will do you really well. Learn about valuation, not just about the fact that you probably want the biggest one you can get, but just learn about why maybe that's not the most important thing. Consider that it's not necessarily about valuation, it's about the right partners, because the right partner means the right long-term success, and it also means everybody being on the same page, rather than always just shooting for the highest number and cutting everyone's throat to get stuff done. It's not the right way to build a business. At least, again, I don't think so. learn about what a cap table is. So, cap tables, dilution, things like that. AngelList also has a really kick-ass free cap table. Actually, it might be something you pay like $5 for. I know I've got sample ones. If you want to send me like a note, I'll send you a cap table. Just like learn how, kind of just how it looks from an ownership perspective to start bringing in outside investors and what those rights typically are. Because as you start actually getting investors that are more sophisticated, that aren't kind of friends and family, they start looking at what's the board structure going to look like, what are our rights, what are our voting rights, what type of stock are we going to have, what's that look like as far as the options pool, how are those things going forward, and there's definitely an art to some of these things. And just learn basics of like what a convertible note is. You don't need to go read like an Investors for Dummies book if you've never done it before. I would say honestly, just like literally start with what exits were in your space, what dilution is, how you drive value, basically, and how you understand investment structures and different types of investment structures like a convertible note. From there, you can learn off that base, but I would definitely start there. So picking out who to talk to then, I think is all about a wish list. And this was something else I didn't do that I just started learning from a few people who have built companies before. So since we're in Iowa, it's kind of like, who are the 4 people in Iowa who you think are going to provide you with the most value as an investor? Like, is it the Kraus family? I don't know who it is, but figure it out and then go find those people directly. Everybody else is irrelevant. You might find somebody who becomes relevant, but concentrate on the people that are going to drive the most value. And as we all grow up, I think it becomes, okay, well, let's look outside of Iowa and just say, who are the 4 people in the world that you think can really help you? Who are the 4 people in the world that you think if you got 5 minutes with them, they can change the world for you? So there's only one person on my 4 people list that I haven't got in front of, and I know everybody in his inner circle, and I'm still working on it. I think I'll probably get it this year. And not every single one of them like me. That's for damn sure. But every single one of those experiences provided me with tremendous value. And I would encourage you just to say, okay, well, let's just set the bar super high for who I want to access. And let's take out of the realm of who's willing to talk to me. And as building my company and my vision, who do I want to talk to because of who I know can help me? I know that's a lot of really selfish I's and me in one sentence, but this is about your vision, your idea, and where you want to go. And no one else is ever going to work anywhere close to as hard as you will to make it happen. And if you expect they will, you're wrong. And you're going to be really disappointed when they take a smoke break or just leave work in the middle of the day. Like, you need to be the person to basically build your company. Again, no one's going to do it for you. Initially, probably no one in your personal life will understand. And again, I was talking to Charisse about this last night, and she really hit on, you should probably tell everybody that like mentally, emotionally, and socially, this will totally own you. And there are a very small group of people that the first time you raise a substantial amount of money, who will treat you the same. People in your family won't, your friends won't, your social groups are going to change. And when that number gets bigger every time, it's even weirder. Like the transition you'll experience as an entrepreneur and as a person, as a founder and as a human being, is really difficult to describe. I think it's actually very much like having a child in the sense that you're never going to know what being a parent is like until you actually go through it. And I think to some people that probably sounds like a huge extreme, but at the same time, it really is a life-changing experience. And if you have the balls to go do it, and if you're successful, and if you can accept that it's going to be difficult, it can be really miraculous. Changing the world is hard, or trying to is extremely hard. People are never going to like line up to tell you how great the idea is until you don't need their help anymore. And if you're willing to go do it, I just think it's totally worth the ride. Any questions? Yeah.
So when you were raising your first round, did you already have it planned out? Like, were you telling, so you said you were thinking of selling it, but did you have that second plan of we're going to raise the second round at this date if we decide not to sell? I mean, like, how far ahead were you planning at that stage?
So when we did the initial kind of round, and I mean, JD was around in every part of this, so if I recollect the story incorrectly at any point in time, feel free to correct me. But I mean, what we were looking at initially was, we weren't trying to raise 1 million, we were trying to raise more, and it's because we were trying to solve a different problem. We started finding out through trying to raise the bigger amount of money that there was another way to do things, and then we adjusted our calculations. We basically said, what are the different values as we move forward that would make this money worth it? So A lot of that was numbers driven. A lot of it was numbers driven on assumptions that we all know are bullshit, but are driven on this is probably feasible, which when we look at it, we feel this is right or wrong and has some, emotional logic to it. And that was a conversation with people kind of internally that if the company is ever worth this much money, we should just sell it and get out because that's like a really nice retirement, right? And what we ended up finding is kind of like we started to see the ramp. It was, we shouldn't sell this thing. We should raise more money and we should get more aggressive. And I think that for me, that was a really clear choice. For other people, I don't know if it was. And then we redid the whole evaluation, which was where are we at? What's the value of that? What do we think we can do? And we were actually really specific. We raised $5 million, and that was the number JD picked. I didn't pick that number. I wanted to raise more initially, right? I mean, I'll admit that. You're like, yeah, you did. So, we just sort of used good judgment to say how much we wanted to raise and what we thought the value at the next step could be. And luckily, I think we did pretty well on the kind of first time out. The second time out, it's a much bigger bet, and we'll see how it works out. But we definitely were saying this is where we're at today, and given our current momentum, this is where we think we'll be in 12 to 24 months, and this is where we think we can accelerate it with you as a partner.
Can I ask a follow-up to JD? JD, at what point did you get involved and what made you be interested? I mean, I'm sure tons of deals come across.
Yeah, I know. I met Ben. I'm a board member and CFO for the company, so I'm really an advisor to the company. I met Ben through Mike and Christian, I believe, along when Ben was touring the state and talking to everybody. And the point was, I really liked Ben. I liked the idea. I loved the concept. And it was a situation where he had a significant problem he was raising capital for as well, and had to do with regulatory issues. And it got retooled. And what this Series A investor did is solve that issue. And so it allowed us to raise less money, non-dilutive money, and money that really solved the problem. What it also did, besides solving a problem, it brought a huge external validation to DeWalt. A financial institution and one of the larger money processors in the nation invested in DeWalt, and that brought external validation to the marketplace as well. And that's why the company was in a nice position to get this carry on $5 million at a very, very nice valuation. But I just believe in his energy. You see what you get, and he's tenacious and He's on the East Coast, West Coast, and everywhere in between on a weekly basis, and you got to respect that.
Well, I feel like I said this the other week, but I want to say this to you because I feel like I feel like just maybe I sort of understand where you're at. Like, if you want to do it here, like it means you're not going to be here a lot. You're going to be externally, and you've got to do deals with guys on the coast because they understand your space really well. But like, I'd love to talk to you. I think you have a fucking huge opportunity, man. Sorry, David.
Yeah, Ben, what's your advice? I mean, for you, Des Moines and Iowa is a sweet spot because of the amount of financial services. I'm just how big the financial services industry is here in Des Moines in Iowa. But like, let's say you're an entertainment company or an entertainment startup where you're maybe mixing, let's just throw out like some type of social site that mixes celebrities with the public population, and it's got like Hollywood written all over it.
Go to LA.
Would you just jump ship and just look for investors, on the coast rather than in Iowa?
So I would actually put money on the fact that there's people within 100 miles of here, or maybe 200 miles, that have probably had a significant ROI on investments in the space. So entertainment companies, distribution companies, content management, back-end solutions, or have access to people that are making big bets in those markets. I'd be happy to share with you some of who I'm assuming those people are. But I think there's a few ways to look at it. One, if you want that kind of quick fix, go to LA. If you want to build your infrastructure out here, and Iowa is where you want to be, it's going to be tough to do it here. A lot of people aren't going to understand it initially here, but they'll vet your idea a lot, and it probably is possible to find people who understand the space really well. They're just not out posting on blogs about it. They're probably just enjoying it in their big-ass house somewhere out in West Des Moines. They're there, they're just quiet. Tej?
Mine was slightly attached to that question. What kind of a startup should even bother trying to raise money in and around Des Moines?
In out of Des Moines?
In or around Des Moines?
Maybe if you would just repeat the question.
So Tej asked, what kind of startup should or should not try to raise money around Des Moines? You have to want to do it here. It is going to be harder because you're here, as far as I know, pretty much regardless of the type of business that you're building, because our culture is not, we are here to make bets. And there aren't a lot of people who are publicly going out and saying, we've made these bets and we've had huge returns. I think that there are certain types of companies where it will be, you'll get a huge source of information, like banking and finance here, especially in insurance. You're going to find people that understand your business model really well, really quickly. I think even in manufacturing, as it relates to the outliers outside of Des Moines, you're going to find a ton of people that understand manufacturing and even biomedical engineering and biosciences out of Ames. So I think those people are there, and Des Moines definitely has its hot spots. And actually, I'm going to take that back. When I think of companies, I'm always like looking at consumer tech. Consumer tech is a weird bet in Des Moines. It really is. And that's just where we happen to be, so I'm pretty jaded on that side of things. But in like biosciences and so on and so forth, like Ames is killing it in that stuff. And I would also bet that around Ames, Iowa City, and Waterloo, you'll find people that understand the medical field really well, as well as agriculture and like kind of just like manufacturing construction. Is that fair? Like, if you want to argue with me, please correct me so I know what to say next time.
I agree with you. I think the consumer tech, the entertainment, the resistance I'm seeing to money coming into those startups here is saying that these entities probably need to look outside of Iowa.
It's
Even for as little as 50K.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, I was in London a couple days ago, and I say this not to say like I was in London and blah 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 blah, right? Like I was really far away from Iowa. I was far away from the coast, and somebody I really respect, who I think is one of the more brilliant minds in kind of like internet data in the world, was like telling me you have to leave Iowa. This is somebody who like I've been struggling to get in front of, and I've been trying to find, and I've been trying to talk to him, and he was telling me you have to leave Iowa. It's a mistake to be in Iowa. And for 15 minutes I defended my choice about why that is. Like I made a conscious choice that for as long as we can, we're going to do it here, and I would be amazed. You know, I think we will open offices other places, but I also think that there's a huge misunderstanding about what value Iowa brings to the table in terms of the resources that we have here. But it is, man, like it's a hustle. I mean, it's a hustle to do it here. And then when you're not doing it here, you've got to manage things here, and you still got to be doing everything else and trying to keep the ship moving. Like it's a different type of problem. Yes?
You say name those 4 people, that could take your business to that next level, both here and in Iowa. Any advice for actually getting that conversation or enticing that? Because, those 4 people may be way out here in there.
So, like, there's a network that connects everybody, right? And I'm not saying go follow them on Twitter and just start like, nice shoes, like, nice bag, like, I like your kids. Like, it gets creepy really fast when you go that direction, right? So what I would suggest doing is do things like, one, understand why you want to talk to them. And it's not tell me what to do. It's I'm doing this thing, and I think you have a really unique knowledge base around what I'm doing. And I think if there's anybody who understands this, it's probably going to be you. And the compliment is not enough. Like, know what questions you're going to ask them. And you might find one, if you figure out in your head and you make it less about the celebrity of that person, but more about, and I mean celebrity to you, really, like that person in your head is like really high on your totem pole, right? Make it more about what question I would ask you. And then you might find out you don't necessarily need that person to answer that question. So maybe that person's not the person for you. But if you start thinking about what value I think this person can provide to me, other than like I think they're cool and I like to hang out with them, you start recognizing what problems you're really trying to solve. And sometimes you're right about it. You just keep asking that question all the way until you get there. And a lot of the times, like for me, one of the things that I did was I started telling people who I wanted to meet. And after I showed up at like different conferences, or I somehow got on stage, or I talked to the right investor and they asked me what I needed, I would say, I want to meet this guy. I think you know him. I would like an introduction. I got told no a lot of times, but every once in a while, like I got a yes, and whether or not it turned out to be like coffee or beer or 5 minutes, like in like a green room at a conference, somehow it worked out. It took forever every time, but. Any other questions?
Yeah, just to have you expound a little bit, you said you would never hire anybody to go raise money for you. And I think I know what you mean, that you were there personally every time, but you wouldn't have gotten the door if you hadn't had JD kind of working for you.
So I agree with you. I agree with you to a certain extent. So JD provided a ton of social validation in Des Moines that I wasn't full of shit. Did that in every single room. And when JD was not in his head, I knew, all right, I can lay in and I can actually tell this guy, like, no, you're doing it wrong. And if I started looking at JD and his body language was, he's pissed. Like, I could use that as a proxy to understand, like, you don't socially understand this environment yet, so learn something from me as well. And I think that's one thing that, like, I learned a lot from you about, like, looking at rooms and understanding a different demographic of people as it related to communicating, that I didn't have that talent. I still don't think I'm exceptionally good at it, but I'm better at it because JD taught me a lot of those things, whether or not he knows it or not. But as it related to the product itself, I would never trust anybody to go say what my product was supposed to do, what my product is supposed to do 5 years from now, what my end game or end goal was. They can interpret it all they want, and that's fine. I can't stop them from interpreting what I say, but as it relates to what it does, what it's supposed to do, how it's supposed to work, and what it means, like, that's mine. And maybe I shouldn't own it that much, but I do. Sure.
What's the next bar? I mean, I remember when you guys hit a million uses in a week. What's the next bar that you're watching your counter and saying, look, we hit 100 million or 200 million transactions in a week? Or what's the next bar for you?
You know, we're really focused on, building the user base. We're less focused on, individual transactions right now, and more focused on building, engagement and ways of empowering people who already understand Dwell and are already kind of a power user of it, how they want to bring other people in. And so we've got 2 products right now, where it's more about those products being released over the next 3 weeks and another one in May, that we feel like are really big game-changing shifts for a company, where it's less about the one kind of next transaction hurdle and more about kind of the platforms that are going to allow us to continue to scale, and how do we kind of leverage what we've already built in order to go do that. I know that sounds like not as, big as it probably should be, but when we process $1 billion in transactions, I'm probably going to say something about that, and then we'll raise the bar even more from that.
We're going to apologize. We keep him Harold in. I know he's got to go do another deal, so we're going to cut it off here. I want to have everybody thank.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.